Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight. This week, we will dedicate our In Focus conversations to the various elements of growth in Utah. We've talked about agriculture, transportation, and air quality, and we'll address housing next. But tonight, our focus is on water and drought. Kicking off our conversation tonight is Ari Bruning, President and CEO of Envision Utah. And Ari, thank you so much for being here tonight, and welcome back to the show.
It's good to be with you, Rosie.
Now, Ari, out of all the issues surrounding growth, water seems to be front and center. Can you recap our state's water situation right now? Where do we rank nationally, and how does it look like moving forward?
Well, Rosie, every time we survey Utahns about what issues they're worried about when it comes to growth, water always comes out at the top. And you can imagine why. It's essential for life, it's essential to our economy, outdoor recreation, vegetation, wildlife habitat, you name it. And we're, depending how you measure it, we're the second or third driest state in the country in an average year. And this is not an average year. This is a terrible year for drought and water. And that affects everything from our wildfire risk to watering restrictions and so forth.
And all you have to do is go outside to the reservoirs, the lakes, and you can see the line where our water levels have receded. I want to talk about climate change. How does climate change impact our drought conditions in the state?
Yeah, climate change is, there's a lot of unknowns about climate change and what it's going to do to our precipitation and so forth. The best models suggest that in the northern part of the state, we actually might get a little more precipitation in the future, which is good news. In the south, we'll get less. And one thing we do know is that it will be hotter. And so that means the longer growing season, more evaporation, and it also means more rain and less snow. And that's concerning because most of our water storage actually is in our snowpack. And so that requires us to take steps and think carefully about the future, about how we're going to make sure we store enough water for our growing population.
So, Ari, what about right now? How is water being used in the state? Is it mainly agricultural, or is it mostly the general population?
Yeah, so most of our water actually is used in the environment for habitat, plants, vegetation, and so forth. Of the water that humans consume, about 80% is used by agriculture, so farmers and ranchers and so forth. And a lot of that, you might think that's water that's available to serve our growing population. A lot of that is far from where our growing population is, so it's a little difficult to move it around and so forth. And Utahns tell us that they would rather cut back on their own use in their yards than take water from farmers. Now, that's not to say that farmers don't have to be part of the solution as well. They'll need to cut back as well and be more efficient in the future as well.
And we will have a guest later on in the show from the farming industry that can talk a little bit more about that. Now, 2021 was another year that Utah experienced extreme drought. You did talk about how we're seeing some of the impacts on the statewide level. Is there any other ways that you can think of how we're being impacted across Utah?
Yeah, so I mentioned wildfire. It impacts our outdoor recreation if you want to go fishing or boating or so forth. There are just numerous impacts of drought that are very concerning. Of course, on the flip side, you also don't want to have too much water. We've seen a little bit of that this year as well.
Now, Ari, with all of our growth, do you think we're going to have enough water?
Yeah, so we are, for the last 10 years, we've been the fastest growing state in the country. And that's because we have a strong economy and a high quality of life. And so our kids stay, and they're about 2/3 of our growth, and other people come join us because it's such a great place. And you can't just turn off the growth unless you want to change those things and not have a strong economy and a high quality of life. So it's really a question of how we grow, not whether we grow. And if we take the right steps in the way we grow and cut back on our water use and so forth, then as far as we can tell, we can accommodate our growing population well into the future, decades into the future.
So, Ari, are we at a reckoning where we need to reconsider our water usage?
Absolutely, we are going to have to cut back our water use. And that's, across the board. It's, farmers are going to need to be more efficient, our businesses, and then us as individuals in our yards. And as you think about cutting back how much we water, there are three things to think about. One is your watering practices. Are you wasting water? Are you watering more than you need to, and so forth? The second thing is what kind of plants are you growing? So I think our yards are going to have to change a little bit. That doesn't mean we have to have rocks and weeds in every yard. You know, our water conservancy districts have a program they call Local Scapes, where it's not no grass, it's less grass. And they can help people with educational materials and even some financial help, I believe, to make that transition. And then the third thing is, how much land are you watering? And that gets down to our lot sizes and so forth. And we are seeing a market shift in our housing that we're developing. And so as long as our zoning allows that market shift to happen, we're actually going to need less water per person just because the yard is smaller or somebody's living in a townhome or so forth. And that actually will help us with our per capita water use going forward.
It's all about changing this collective mindset and starting to think about those little steps that we can take even on that individual level. All right, we have time for final thoughts. Anything you want to leave our audience with tonight?
Yeah, well, this is going to be one of our biggest challenges as a state as we grow, is managing our water supply and making sure we have enough water for growing food, for our wildlife, for recreation, and for our yards. But we can do it. We just, as you mentioned, we have to change our mindset a little bit. And it'll turn out just fine. It takes a little bit of that shift.
We can do it. You've been hearing from Ari Bruning, President and CEO of Envision Utah. And Ari, thank you so much for being here tonight and for sharing your insight.
Well, thank you.
We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on growth in Utah, water, and drought. Up next in our conversation is Darren Hess, Assistant General Manager and COO of the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. Darren, thank you so much for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rosie, for having me. Appreciate it.
Darren, as the Assistant General Manager and COO of the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, could you tell us about your responsibilities and what you do there?
Sure, I would be happy to. So Weber Basin, we serve 5 counties in northern Utah. So Weber Davis, Morgan Summit, and some of Box Elder County. And so we deliver drinking water to about 60 cities in the area. We also deliver ag water, irrigation water, to about 60 irrigation utilities as well. In addition to those supplies or deliveries, we also deliver water to the Wasatch Back. We deliver water to about 25,000 residents on the Wasatch Back. We also have a large secondary water system that we deliver water to, about 25,000 connections on the Wasatch Front. We retail that water to those individuals and those customers, and I essentially oversee the operations or the delivery of that water to those individuals.
So Darren, how are our water sources right now? Where are we with our runoff, water storage, and drought?
Well, not good. It has been a difficult year for water providers to be able to provide water in a year like this. But we really appreciate the public and their efforts to conserve water. We have asked individuals to cut water deliveries by 20%, and they've done an excellent job on doing that. We really appreciate their help. But our reservoirs are about 30% currently. So we're definitely, we haven't been this low since 1992. So it's been about 30 years since our reservoirs have been this low. And northern Utah has been hit particularly hard with this drought. And so, but we really appreciate the public coming together, helping, and to ensure that we get through the end of this season. And we're going to cut the season off a little bit early on September 20th. And our customers know that, and they understand that because of this situation, we do have to cut off the season a little bit early.
So we're wondering, are there any challenges with allocation and pricing of water?
There are challenges. You know, water is quite inexpensive in Utah. Maybe we are a victim of our own success because water is quite inexpensive. We do have infrastructure on the east side. We deliver water to the west side, and we have a lot of infrastructure, gravity fed, so we don't have to pump a lot of water. So it is difficult to be able to deliver all the water supplies that we have, but we want to make sure that we're charging the water appropriately for the water that is delivered. So we look at development costs, operation maintenance costs, capital costs, and we want to make sure that we price the water accordingly.
Let's talk about developing your water plan. How long does it take and how hard is it to implement?
Well, we have developed many water plans throughout the years. We've got a water supply and demand plan that we've developed, and it probably takes a couple of years to initially develop that plan, and then we continue to update that. And we really look at the demands that we have on the system. We look at future population growth, and we want to make sure that we have enough demand for the population growth. And then we look at our supplies and how can we match that to the demands that we're seeing. You know, not just, and outdoor demands are 2/3 of the water that we supply. So it's really paramount that individuals look at their own water use, their own water supplies, and try to cut back that outdoor water use.
Do you project future growth into your calculations on water usage? What does the usage look like in the next decade or two?
Yes, we do. We've looked extensively at growth, and we know and understand that our population will double by 2060, 2070 timeframe. That's a lot of individuals that have to come in and live for us in northern Utah, but throughout the state. And so we need to ensure that we're planning appropriately. We're working with other agencies, cities, communities, and counties to be able to plan accordingly for this new development. And we want to make sure that as we plan for new development, that we're changing how communities develop, how they plan. And we want to make sure that water planning is really at the forefront of when these communities are looking to move forward and plan accordingly for future water supplies.
How about our groundwater? Is that being used at too fast a clip, and what happens when it's all gone?
That's a great question. We have been pumping our groundwater supplies quite extensively this year because our surface water supplies it's been very difficult for those supplies. So we have been pumping the groundwater quite a bit this year, and it's been quite an uptick in groundwater deliveries. And we continually monitor those groundwater levels all the time. And so we're monitoring those. We typically just pump in the summertime to augment our supplies. So we do let our wells rest in the wintertime. And so the aquifer has a chance to recharge. But years like this, when we have a drought like we currently do, it's difficult. And it'll take a couple of years for groundwater supplies to rebound. And hopefully we can see the moisture come back.
Darren, we've got about less than a minute left, but let's talk about the Great Salt Lake. How important is it, and how do we get its levels back up?
Well, the Great Salt Lake's extremely important to the economy in Utah. There's so many different things that the Great Salt Lake does for us. We have lake effect snow that the Great Salt Lake really helps us with. We have the brine industry, the economy associated with that. There's just so many different levels that people really don't understand what the Great Salt Lake is doing for us. And so it's critical that we preserve this resource, because if it continues to dwindle, we potentially have dust storms that could kick up, and then we put contaminants into the air, and we really do not want that for the population in Utah. So we want to make sure that we do everything we can, and there's no silver bullet to helping the Great Salt Lake. It's going to take a combined effort from municipalities, cities, counties, and it's going to be teamwork working together to ensure that we do everything we possibly can to maybe change how we develop, reduce outdoor water supplies, and let's make sure we do whatever we can to help the Great Salt Lake. But it's not an easy problem, and there's a lot of professional people that are working on how we can help the Great Salt Lake and preserve its future.
It's not an easy task, but I believe in us. You've been hearing from Darren Hess, Assistant General Manager and COO of the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. Darren, thanks for being a part of this conversation tonight. It was great to have you.
Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on growth in Utah, water, and drought. Rounding out our conversation tonight via Zoom is Warren Peterson, retired Land and Natural Resources Vice President for Farmland Reserve, Inc. Warren, we appreciate you for being here tonight. Let's start out our conversation with your background in water. Could you tell us about your experience?
Yeah, to summarize a lifetime in water, I grew up on a farm cleaning ditches, watching the sky and watching the snowpack. In school, I studied water, water law, and water policy. And since then, I've been involved in water management, water planning, water law in 30 states and 8 countries, and advising farmers, local government, state government, governors, legislators, and Utah companies, even those wanting to move to Utah in water. So that's been a 44-year career. Glad to be here with you tonight. What you're doing is very important. Let me just echo a couple of things that I've heard tonight. Darren is right. Team is a water sport. It's complex. It takes broad understanding. No one can do it alone, and Mother Nature's in charge. So that's what I've learned in 44 years.
Well, it sounds like you're the person that we want to talk to tonight. You're definitely the water expert. Now, Utah Governor Spencer Cox says the agriculture industry uses the bulk of our water supply. But help us put that into perspective and what gets produced as a result of that water use.
Right. Let's look at that. And Ari mentioned this before, but 94% of the water that falls on the Utah landscape stays in nature. For human use, we take 6% of the total water supply, but somewhere between 75 and 82% of that, depending on the year and the locale.
Warren, I'm wondering if you can hear us. You are frozen on our end. Warren, are you there? Oh, it looks like, oh, there. Warren, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let's start over with that question. We lost you for a little bit there. You know, it's technology, it's okay. Tell us again about how the agriculture industry uses the bulk of our supply and what gets produced as a result of that.
Sure. Now let's not talk about rural broadband service, shall we? All right. So yes, so the 75 to 82% of, 6% goes to human use, and 75 to 80% of that, 82% actually goes to irrigated agriculture. We grow food and fiber with it. Local businesses scattered across Utah use that water for their businesses to feed us. So it's not like it's all coming out of one pocket of water. This water is spread around and used in different locales, and that's what keeps our rural economies running. Well, what do we grow? We grow vegetables, we grow grains, we grow one of the big crops, big cash crops in Utah is alfalfa and alfalfa seed. Utah has a competitive advantage there. We grow world-class alfalfa. So think of it. You have farmers in Escalante or Tremonton or Delta, and they're growing, they have a competitive advantage over every other farmer in the world because of how our high deserts can grow this kind of crop. But most of it stays home. Our Utah alfalfa feeds Utah cows. They produce Utah milk that's processed in Utah. It goes on grocery shelves, and then where it's purchased and used by Utah families. So we're all in this together in a very real way.
Yeah, so this water use is justifiably being used by the agriculture industry. But with the drought, Warren, do you think that farmers should be cutting back on their water use? And if so, how can they do that?
Well, the truth is they are cutting back. Sorry for the graphic being kind of crude, but this chart pulled today from the Sevier River system. This is real time, pulled this afternoon. What you see is all the major reservoirs on the Sevier River, and they're less than 10% water. The water just isn't there, so farmers can't use water. It's gone, and because of that, they're cutting back on the amount of crop they grow. And so we have Utah businesses, think of it. These are Utah businesses that are cutting back on their production because they're lacking that critical input, that critical resource of water. And this year is going to be bad. Next year, if we don't have snowpack, these reservoirs in this diagram hold about a 2-year supply of water. So you can see we're in trouble. And if we don't have water, a good winter this year, and climate trends suggest that maybe we won't, we're going to have farmers going out of business. We're going to have rural poverty worse than it is now. And we're going to have our food supplies shrinking. Because it's not just Utah. Central Valley of California produces about 50% of the food value in the country. And they're in the same state we're in. So the farms like this all across the West are in the same condition, and it's not good.
Warren, we have to wrap, but we have about 30 seconds left. Final words. What would you like to leave our viewers with tonight?
Well, we need to learn about climate change, but most of all, we need to learn about water. We need to be wise in using this resource, and we're all in this together. And if you think you're making the best use of water, take a good look at Great Salt Lake, and then ask yourself, am I really making the wisest use of water? That's what I'd ask people to do.
You've been hearing from Warren Peterson, retired Land and Natural Resources Vice President for Farmland Reserve, Inc. And Warren, thank you so much for speaking to us tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And don't forget, we'd love to hear from you about the show. We invite you to join our Facebook group by searching for ABC4 In Focus, or send us an email, infocus@abc4.com.